A very warm welcome from beautiful Switzerland. Today we are out with Yamaha's 125 motorcycle lineup.
And we're busting 3 myths you might have about A1 bikes. Stay tuned. Before we take a look at which 3 preconceptions they are, we should quickly also look at what we're actually riding here, Frankie.
Yeah, and the bikes already look quite different, but they actually aren't that wildly different. And what stands out among the similarities is that all 3 look like they're bigger brothers or sisters. We've got the MT125 here, which looks just like the MT09, like the R1 you can see here, or like the 900 XSR over there. And you've got to say, when you're a beginner getting into motorcycling, it's always cool if passers-by maybe have to look twice and think, what bike is that then? Is it the big one or the small one? That's already cool. Other than that, all of them have the 125 cubic centimeter single cylinder engine fitted, which puts a solid 15 horsepower or 11 kilowatts to the road at 10,000 revolutions per minute. We've also got roughly the same weight across the board at 140 kilograms. This one here a bit more, because of course it's got a bit more fairing. And under the tank we've also got the 11-liter tank capacity across the board.
And because you said earlier they look like the big siblings, that's true. In the saddle of the XSR 125, looked in the rearview mirror, you really do have to look twice and know your stuff to realize these are only 125s. 15 horsepower is also what's allowed in the A1 license category. You can't have more. And as you said earlier, the dream bike is rarely the first one, but with these 3 you can at least feel a bit as if you're already riding the dream bike because visually they're so close. Where do they differ? So I'd call the R1 the top model here. There's also an optional quick shifter, for example, and the MT125 is very similar technically. Take the fork diameter, for example. It's the same on both. This one's a bit of the budget version with 37mm stanchion diameter. We've also got a smaller braking system front and rear. It doesn't slow quite as hard, but visually it's for those who like to enjoy that retro flair. Right, time for the first myth, and we'll tell you somewhere else.
Yeah, 15 horsepower. That's so little you might as well run. That's our first myth, which we're hopefully going to debunk now in this check here. We're doing a drag race, and not between the motorbikes, they all have the same engine, but between machine and human, or machine and human.
And so it isn't too easy for the MT125. We'll let Frankie run along this 30-meter strip and I'll wedge my 3-digit weight onto the MT125 and see who's quicker. Of course, it's all officially cordoned off and approved. I'm curious how it turns out. Stay tuned. Frankie, you didn't stand a chance there, did you?
Yeah, a little at the start, but
then full power. I even got into second gear, but acceleration isn't everything after all. Now let's take a look at what a 125 engine can manage on the motorway in Switzerland, where 120 kilometers per hour is allowed, shall we?
There we've already got it. Let's roll back a bit here. I shift into 5th gear and see if it works for overtaking here. Although I've got a bit of a feeling about this. Yeah, okay, it's coming. Look, 6th gear, we're at 115, 116. That's smooth. then head down on the tank, and here we are already at 120 kilometers per hour, which means here in Switzerland, you can't go faster anywhere anyway. 120 kilometers per hour is the limit. No problem. Easy, cheesy. Exactly. And it actually goes really well. Even now here in flowing traffic. That's really no issue at all. Sixth gear, fifth gear goes fine up to 110 kilometers per hour. Or not fine, but it does get to 110 kilometers per hour. In sixth gear, here now at 100 kilometers per hour up to 110 kilometers per hour, it wobbles a bit. And then you really need to wring its neck. But then you also reach 120 kilometers per hour, which of course is great. That just makes life easier. Especially if you want to take a fun machine like this and still use it as a commuter bike to work, or simply to get quickly from A to B now and then. That definitely makes sense. Definitiv Sinn.
We've sat ourselves down here on the steps in the old town of Sursee, Frankie, to talk about the second myth. These are only bikes for youngsters and beginners, and of course that's true to some extent. The clutch is light, the weight is low, the handling is playful, the seat height is comfortable, above all a small step arch length because the saddle is relatively narrow on all three. But is it really the case that they're only for beginners in your view?
Not at all. As I said, the myth is actually the word only. I think it's great that they're suitable for beginners. They should be, as you said, but that only is the catch, because I think that's exactly what's wrong. And we've also noticed that a bit today, riding around all day. For me, the most important point right up front, they're enormous fun machines. Because really, there are hardly any other bikes that you can push to their limits on legal roads here in Switzerland. You can finally wring out an engine again, and you don't always have to keep looking at the speedo thinking, I'm going to end up in prison any moment. Well, how did it go for you?
Yeah, so for our viewers from outside Switzerland, 80 kilometers per hour is the speed limit here outside towns, and that really is the sweet spot for these bikes. You've still got a bit in reserve. You can accelerate a little out of a bend, for example, and that's when it really gets fun. And we've now also been in a bit of an urban setting. We left that behind and headed towards the hills and the mountains. And there we found more bends, especially the MT125 and the R125 really make a good impression in terms of chassis. With my build, I'm definitely pushing them to the limit. I'm 103 kilos and 1 meter 87. Frankie, you're about 1 meter 80. And still, it's fun. It reminded me of my own time. I rode a 125 myself for 2 years before I got my full A license, and those were cool experiences. You do have to feel your way into it a bit. The line through a corner is crucial because you can't just correct it by rolling on the throttle. No, if the line's messed up, then it's messed up, and if you brake too early and too much, then that's how it is. And in that sense, it's a step back to a kind of motorcycling that's actually made me very happy today.
And that's also something that does many riders good, even if they're not beginners, to learn that lesson again. To really take a closer look at the line through the corners and to practice that. What you said about the chassis, what you pointed out, also the braking behavior, I've got to say with the R125 and also the MT125, from my point of view, really flawless. And also the tires, we can say, the Michelin Pilot Street comes as standard here, and you really notice these quality components, which normally on a 125 aren't really common or fitted as standard. That, of course, makes it not only good for beginners,
but also for beginners and maybe even for people who just want to try it out. Because you mustn't forget, R1 bikes aren't only for people with a motorcycle license. Car drivers with code 111 in Austria or B196 in Germany, and now also in your country, are allowed to ride R1 bikes. And if you just want to give it a go and get into it with a low threshold, then this is really something where even grown men can have fun. and approach the subject at a modest cost. And I don't necessarily mean the base price, because with these three, the XSR is a bit cheaper, about 500 Swiss francs cheaper, but with the MT125 and the R125, you do have to put down quite a chunk of money for this class. We'll link the exact prices below. But it is the case that later on, because insurance and tax are very cheap, you can really get around at a low cost.
And on top of that, of course, you've got the fuel consumption. We mentioned it in the intro, I think, 2.2 liters per 100 kilometers. With the 11-liter tank, you can actually get almost 500 kilometers out of it. Which means if you're riding with the big boys on their thousands, you'll probably even have to refuel later than they do.
To be fair, you'll probably also be a bit later arriving at the petrol station, but that's fine. You can really wait until the fuel price drops again. 500 kilometers of range is just crazy. Maybe you wouldn't do it all in one go, but a day tour like we did today, heading out of the city, that's definitely possible with these. And for all beginners who might be curious and want to dip a toe in, maybe without much experience, Frankie, how is it in Switzerland when it comes to insurance? Who do you go to, or what do you have to look out for?
Well, of course, we can recommend Helvetia Switzerland. That's our partner when it comes to motorcycle insurance. They also currently have a welcome discount, which you can definitely check out. Maybe one last topic we can touch on here. The seating position, the ergonomics, because that also plays a role in accessibility and how you can ride through tighter bends. For me, at 1.80 meters, I found it a bit easier to ride all three bikes. I've got to say, the MT125 was logically super comfortable, upright riding position, but still sporty. The R125 is of course a proper sport bike. You could feel the steering angle is naturally a bit more limited, but still better than other models. With the XSR I had more trouble, but I guess for you as a taller guy, a bigger man, it might be different. If you're starting out riding with a certain height, you might quickly find your limits.
Funny that you say that, Frankie, because for me it's exactly the other way around. With the XSR 125, I was instantly, visually, head over heels in love. It's such a proper feel-good bike, one I could really imagine for the city. But also for heading out, those classic short runs to the post office, shopping, whatever, and it's also got the most usable pillion seat. There's probably even room for a passenger if I'm not in the front row myself, or you can strap luggage solutions on there. So that one is by far the best for me. Also the most relaxed knee angle and the widest handlebars. Top. With the MT125, I felt it was the sportiest to ride. Brilliant, I really liked it. I sit nicely over the front wheel, can push it through the corners, especially those tight bends we had. Spot on, but the knee angle, yeah, that was really on the sharp side. My legs only just squeezed under those tank cutouts. And yes, the sporty position, as you said, naturally on the sport bike. For me, it was this weight on the balls of my hands, which you have to like, because the riding position forces you into it. I'd need stronger abs than I've got, and the knee angle was simply too sharp. But I think for a lot of young riders out there, it's probably the dream bike visually, and performance-wise, it's the one that works best. The myth about performance and all the tech that's fitted, we'll take a look at that somewhere else, I'd say.
Yeah, and we're already back here at Yamaha Switzerland. We've had a very long day, putting a lot of miles with these quick and fun little rockets. And there's still one myth left that we want to clear up. People usually say 1 to 5cc bikes have only very Spartan electronics. If any at all, it's all a bit neglected. I think we've had a different experience.
That outdated tech people often claim about A1 bikes. These three gems here really break the mold, especially the sportier models, the R125 and the MT125. With the XSR125, because of the older look and that retro idea, not everything is fitted. But let's keep it short, what have we got? TFT display with connectivity function and navigation, if you've got the Yamaha app, in both the MT125 and the R125. We've got traction control, switchable as well, again only on those two models. On the XSR, the display is a round LC unit, which I think suits the neo-retro style nicely, and there's no traction control fitted. Also, as we mentioned earlier, slightly smaller brakes. Otherwise, in terms of equipment with the R125 Frankie, you can even get a quick shifter if you want, right?
Yes, quick shifter, and of course, for the racetrack, lap time monitoring. So here you can actually measure your lap times. And I think that's a real unique feature on a 125 that they fitted that here. As you said, traction control I personally find extremely important, especially if we're talking about beginner riders again, because you just never know what's on the road or what kind of environment you're riding in. And it's so cool to have traction control even on a 125.
And we had good weather today, but when it's wet, road markings in the city, we were riding a fair bit too. In urban areas, manhole covers, it can happen quicker than you think, even with 15 horsepower. And 15 horsepower is another keyword because there's also a very special piece of technology fitted to the engine, right, Frankie?
Yes. Something flashes a bit oddly on the display at 7,500 revs, VVA, and that stands for variable valve actuation. And what that means is that from 7,500 revolutions per minute, another camshaft is engaged. Put simply, that makes the power delivery feel constant from the low rev range right up to the high revs, so you can rev it out, it feels consistent, and you've always got enough power across the whole range.
Incredible. A variable valve system in a 125 motorcycle, we've really come a long way in 2025. It's amazing what's possible now. And yes, these things were great fun. With the smaller XSR back there, you do have to make a few compromises, but otherwise the level is really very high. I also think the way the traction control works is impressive. If you play around and lift the front wheel, for example, the traction control immediately cuts in. So that really works well. And with the latest update for the MT and the R125, Yamaha has taken a step forward. That's really not something you see every day. And I think that brings us a bit to the conclusion, Frankie, don't you? These 125s really took me back to my younger and slimmer days. Sure, going uphill, I did notice I've put on a bit of weight, but thank goodness the bikes too. All in all, it was a cool day for me. I think there's something here for everyone that's obvious just from the looks. As I said, at their core, they all share the same engine. And in that sense, Yamaha definitely has one of the broadest portfolios you'll find on the market. And I had a blast today. How was it for you, Frankie?
Yeah, same here. Just being able to ride all three different models was cool. Also knowing, as we said, that the bigger brothers are waiting, looking just the same. And I was actually surprised that the XSR 125 is still lagging behind a bit at the moment. Sure, okay, it's the most attractive in terms of price. But if someone really says, hey, I'm a beginner, safety is important to me, comfort is important, that person is probably better off with the R125 or the MT125. But for those who just love that cool retro look and simply want to ride pure motorcycling, there's also still that alternative. And I think it's important that within the lineup, they cater to as broad a customer base as possible in this segment. And Yamaha really does that well.
Yeah, I think it's more the option for people who are looking for a second or third bike for the city, one that's cheap to run and so on, and who can handle 15 horsepower just fine and maybe don't really need traction control. So it's a nice addition to the lineup because I just noticed now LED lights front and back are standard on all three as well. So things really have moved on in the last few years. Very cool. Now it's your turn. Drop us a comment below. What are your experiences? Which one did you start out on? And would you take the step back? And if you're just getting started now, we hope we've been able to clear up a few of these myths for you.
Nothing left to say but happy beginner.